Ah. Hannah Garrison. Yeah. She's in the chat with us now, presumably she.
Whoa!
Yeah. It's a cool design.
Has everyone gotten the attendance form?
Yeah.
All right.
Indeed. Indeed. I'll switch to my stream. So yeah, hi everybody. How many of you were here last week? I just want to get like a general sense of like who was and wasn't here. I think I think most of you were. Um but yeah, honestly, I mean it's a redundant question because if there's even like one person that wasn't here last week, it would probably be worth like clarifying a few things. Last week began with 3D modeling, and I introduced everybody to like what the basics of 3D modeling is like in Blender, and we got up to the point where sorry, hold on, it's in here. Game Dev Club, learning, Unit 1 3D modeling. And so we ran through two PowerPoints. We ran through a PowerPoint that's like Introduction to Blender, and it discusses a program called Blender. I think almost everyone here, I don't remember Jordy maybe or like Hannah, but I think everyone else, I don't know. It doesn't matter. Just point is we covered basics of 3D modeling. Today we're going to do slightly more advanced stuff. Last time we made it all the way to the end of this PowerPoint right here, which you guys, by the way, do have access to. It was posted in plot summary. There's a Google Drive link to a folder that has everything that we covered, and two videos of me going over stuff. But we made it pretty much to this slide where I was like, yo, you can make everything you see here using Blender and just using extruding and scaling. And that's the point that we got to in the official meeting in that like 1 hour period. So we got to the point where you could open Blender and you could pretty confidently and comfortably do stuff like this, like what I'm doing right now, where you like, I don't know, boom, maybe you make a airplane and you scale these wings down a little bit and do that maybe, and we pretty much made it to the point where people were capable of producing um little designs uh like this, just from what we covered last meeting. um uh, and so this meeting, we're just going to continue learning stuff from Blender that's worth uh, understanding a little bit better. There's a number of things we're going to cover, and they're just details about how to use uh, a Blender to 3D model stuff. And I did all of this just by extruding and scaling. Lol, I think this is acceptable unless Illinois. So yeah, I for what it's worth, I love it when you guys talk and like when we talk, I guess. So like don't be afraid to interrupt me because I have this tendency to just kind of ramble unceasingly. Uh and so I space out my words with like but or like or something, and then I end up everyone's no one wants to interrupt me because it's a constant stream, and I really do like being interrupted. So feel free. But that being said, this is where we were last week. We were at this point, and we were learning about loop cuts. That's like the one thing that we hadn't covered. So if you guys all have Blender, I'd recommend that you crack it open and we explore this stuff together. What we did last week is some people at least felt comfortable sharing their screens, and so I could get a sense that people were like, I don't know, following along or like doing their own thing, and I could comment on what they were doing and if they were having some issue. Um, but yeah, I'm just introducing you guys to like the yes. Um, I'm just gonna introduce you guys to like the keybinds and the operations and what they do, and the different like techniques that you can do using loop cuts, for example. General body meetings. How much is Blender? $0. Yeah, completely free. Oh man. Um, so Lexi, I presume you weren't here in the last meeting, and that's totally okay, by the way. Like not, you know.
I
But
had a Calc 2 test.
oh, I feel you. I feel you. I had a Calc 3 quiz today. Yeah, it's yeah. But yeah, so Blender will help you a lot in Calc 3 actually. But yeah, Blender's an incredibly powerful program, completely free and very, very powerful. It's quickly being adopted by some big companies. Ubisoft uses it. Minecraft, the 3D models involved in like Steve and like the new some of the new mobs that are coming out with like the next cave update. If you watch their like little montage video, you'll catch glimpses of Blender in the background when they're showing off like how they're modeling stuff. It's all done in Blender. So Blender, really powerful program. I think we covered deleting. No, we didn't. That was in like the extra part of the meeting. So so yeah, that's important. In Blender, like once you open it up, I feel bad I I feel bad leaving anyone in the dust because like Alexia, for example, you won't be able to like follow along too well if you don't have like if you weren't here last meeting, I guess.
I'll try
The
to
way
follow along. I'll look at the PowerPoints a little later.
okay, okay. Well, I don't my point is I'm just going to proceed as if like people were here for the last meeting, and I want to clarify something because this isn't something that I discussed with like the with the club leadership either. I have like my like lessons that I've prepared come in like modules. So like all of 3D modeling, it's like it is sequential, but then once 3D modeling is over and we start doing like I don't know Unreal Engine stuff and like doing lighting and shading in Unreal Engine, uh like when we start that it'll be like with renewed sense of no expectations, like nobody knows anything and we're starting from scratch. But that's what the last meeting was like, and so sorry about that. Anyways, so Blender, vertices and stuff, you can delete individual vertices when you're in edit mode. So if we're in edit mode right here, and you hit the delete button, which is X, you encounter significantly more options than you otherwise would have. Um, when you're in object mode and object mode, edit mode up here, the keybind to switch between those is tab. It's very quick. When you're in edit mode and you hit X, uh, you can delete so much more. When you're in object mode and you hit X, it's just like, do you want to delete? Yes. But in edit mode, there's details about what you're deleting. So if I select this vertex here and I do delete edges, nothing happens. If I select this vertex and I do delete faces, nothing happens because I don't have any faces selected. If I select these 4 vertices, I'm holding shift and left clicking, and do delete edges, the edges disappear, which means that all the connective faces, like the face that used to be between those 4 points, can no longer exist. It's not complete, so it doesn't know what to do. However, if I just delete the face, it preserves the edges. That's the only thing there is just to have a understanding that like um deleting vertices and faces and edges all mean kind of different things. Like if I do delete vertex over here, it's going to kill the edges with it, and suddenly we have that whole wing has been destroyed. um, so yeah, if I like delete this vertex right here, the connected edges are destroyed, the faces that were supported by those edges are destroyed. And so yeah, just worth like understanding why there's all these different options when you just want to delete something. It seems simple, but it's a little more complicated. Um, so yeah, this is a little almost like a little quizzy kind of thing. If I delete these two vertices here, we're gonna end up with a cube that looks like a just a backplate because the edge gets deleted, the edge gets deleted, the face that was supported by those two edges gets deleted. So all you're left with is this. If I delete the edge, however, we end up with that because when the edge is gone, it can't support those two faces, but it preserves the vertices. So and then if I delete these two faces, it preserves everything but the faces. So interestingly enough, deleting a face, even though a face is like composed of edges and vertices, when you say delete face, you preserve edges and vertices. When you say delete edge, you preserve vertices. When you say delete vertices, you preserve nothing. That's a good way to think of it. But yeah, just if I delete these vertices, right, instead of doing delete faces, we're left with a single floating edge, which is not good. You know, you don't want something like that in your 3D model. Um, so yeah, the undo button. This is kind of important. It can only go back so far. This is me like undoing some giant mess that I made, and you can hit Control Z. You can do Control Shift Z to redo, but it can only go so far. It goes like 20 moves back or something. And then subdivision. So this is a pretty big one, kind of. Um, when you want to subdivide a surface, in Blender, when you right click and you have like a face, let me Control Z so we can get that face back. There we go. If I want to perform subdivisions, let's say on like the cockpit over here, that seems like an appropriate thing. I can right click and I can do subdivide. um, while I'm in face select. If I'm in edge select, it'll have subdivide, but it'll have slightly different options that are more related to edges. But if I right click and I do subdivide while I'm in the face selection thing, I can divide this face, I can break it down. Now, whenever you do an operation in Blender, whenever you perform some extrusion or something, you get this little thing on the bottom left here. And this is like a context sensitive little menu that tells you about the subdivision you just performed. And in here, I can be like, yo, 2 cuts, 3 cuts, 4 cuts. I want to subdivide it a lot of times, and I want it to be smooth, and it'll attempt to smooth out the surface. And create n-gons. What that's referring to is it's referring to the polygon that is formed along the edge of this subdivision. So this face right here, this like trapezoid looking face, has more than 4 edges. It has more than 4 vertices. That is referred to as an n-gon, and they're bad. If I uncheck this, see what it's doing? It's triangulating that trapezoid, and that triangulation is actually like a really important thing, because if you don't do it, the computer will do it for you, and the computer can get it wrong sometimes, and that's not good. So typically, um, yeah, typically when you subdivide, you got to be very careful about creating n-gons there. And that's what that little checkbox did. It let me turn that off so that it triangulated. Um, so yeah, n-gon, not an n-gon. This is an n-gon because it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. vertices. But we'll get into n-gons a bit later. We're not even in the intermediate PowerPoint yet, just finishing up the beginner PowerPoint here. The expand selection tool. This is useful. If you click on like a face or something, and then you hold down Control and you hit the plus on your number pad. If you don't have a number pad, don't worry about it. This tool isn't super useful, and I think there's other ways to emulate it without a number pad. But it's kind of like a fill tool almost. It's like an iterative fill tool. Let me explain. If I select this face and then I do it once, and then I do it again, and then I do it again, you see it's like the selection is like spreading. And then if I like deselect a face and then hit Control minus, the deselection spreads. So it's a useful little tool sometimes. Other times not so much. But yeah, just that selection tool. Selecting is a big part of Blender. Sometimes you want to efficiently select this entire collection of faces. You're gonna, if you don't know about circle select or box select, you're gonna sit here and you're gonna be shift clicking them and you're gonna be having a very bad time. If you use circle select, you're gonna have a much faster time. Just quickly, boom, there we go. Okay, we hit two. Let's deselect those and we got it. There's a lot of situations where selection is burning your time, and that can be very frustrating and not cool, and you don't want that. So yeah, um, don't take the selection tools seriously because they do save you time. But this one, it's not a very common one. Um, so what did we just learn? Just a quick recap. Quick recap. Undoing, you have limits to how much you can undo. You really can't undo more than like 30 times by default. There's a setting to crank that up, but it's not really practical anyways. I mean, if you're undoing 30 times, you messed up a while back, and that's kind of unfortunate. Extruding is cool and easy, and you can model most things with it. When we left off, we had just learned about extrusion, and so extrusion is the process by which I generate new geometry from like a face. Like if I extrude that, that's my extrusion. If I extrude this, extruded. If I extrude that, extruded. Um, and then I just extruded it again and I scaled it in, and I can extrude it inwards, scale it in, extrude it outwards. Extrusion is the way that I modeled this plane. I started with a cube and I just extrude, scale, extrude, scale. Uh, got like basically wings there, like extrude, can extrude both of these, and then I right click to cancel, but the geometry is still there. That was a big part of the last meeting, talking about how the geometry sticks around, and then I can scale them apart from each other by scaling them on the y-axis, and scale on the z-axis, scale on the x-axis, grab on the x-axis, uh, maybe give this like a front-facing intake, just a bunch of extruding, so, and a little cockpit or something. And it's a weird plane, but it'll fly if we program it well. um, so yeah, extruding. It's very very important, and it lets you make just about anything when it comes to 3D modeling. Um, Extruding, canceling, not undoing, and then scaling lets you make nice indentations. What am I referring to? I'm referring to how when I hit E right now, it has created new geometry, and then in an additional step, I can right click, and once I right click here, it's going to cancel not the extrusion, not the creation of the geometry. It's going to cancel the movement of the geometry. So when I right click, the geometry is still there, but it's been reset to the exact position that it started at. So it's still there. I can grab it and move it around, and so I can scale that down. And now I have this cool like potential for an indent on the wing. And I don't know. I'm sure you could make like wings that have like holes in them by doing that. Uh, Deleting this face or something, and then connecting those two faces. Boom. I know that's broken geometry right there. I haven't connected the faces, but just my point stands. Um, and then loop cuts, loop cuts, loop cuts. Those are performed by doing Control R. So if I wanted to do loop cuts on this wing, I could do Control R, and then I mouse over the place where I want to do the loop cuts. You can see how where I mouse over affects where the loop cuts go. So I mouse over here, and I do like 3 of them, and then from that, there's some pretty cool things that can come of this. We can make this into like a stealth bomber or something. Um, uh, yeah, loop cuts. Let you give it wonky, jagged wings. Even though the entire left half of this is uh pretty broken. I'm gonna take a moment here and I'm gonna do a little something that I haven't taught about yet, but we'll get to that probably today, I think. And I'm just gonna mirror this on the y-axis. There we go. And now it's automatically mirroring my options. That is a thing in Blender. There is mirroring. That's critical. So automatically mirrors geometry for me. Anyways, back to that selecting, expanding the selection with numpad plus. That's also worth understanding. That's what we just covered in subdividing. So important principles. What are edge loops and why should we preserve them? And as well as always using a reference image when you want to model something. It really helps when you have something to look at when you want to model, but it also really helps when you preserve your edge loops. And so here's some examples of edge loops. This is referred to as an edge loop. It is like a continuous length of edges. It's very difficult to describe. That's why I have these images. I don't know how to like describe it mathematically or in like a very direct manner, but here's an edge loop for like the face. So you can see the jaw has this like edge loop. The this like loop around the ear could be an edge loop. And yeah, it's you can kind of see what I mean by loop. Like they tend to form a circle kind of like around the eyes here, whatever. Ooh, that's unfortunate. I wonder what was missing in this slide. Oh, select edge loops in Blender by alt clicking. Yes, that's valuable. That's very valuable. So, let me make the monkey here. So the monkey does have some edge loops by default. So if I'm in face select, this is really important actually, guys. This is probably the most critical thing so far, aside from extruding and scaling. If I hold down alt, I'm holding it down right now, and I click on this edge, it selects the loop of faces that goes like perpendicular to that edge. If I had clicked with alt on this edge, it selects that loop. See this edge, this edge, this edge, this edge. You see what's going on here? And that's in face select. If I was in like vertex select and I selected an edge, you see it selected that loop. It tried to select as much of that loop as it could. If I'm in edge select mode, yeah, it's same deal. But in face select, it selects the whole like face loop. So there we go. There's a very distinct edge loop. Um, oh, hmm. Someone just left. And yeah, and then vertex, you can just select that loop. It looks like the vertex loop actually doesn't make it all the way around here. Oh, no, not that one doesn't. Interesting, but the outer one does. So, yeah, yeah, loops. Alt clicking lets you select them. Very, very important for quickly selecting some things. There's situations where that's relevant. And so a little bit of review before we move on to the slightly more interesting PowerPoint with 30 minutes left. Almost all 3D modeling can be accomplished just with extruding and translating. True or false? True. Very true. Almost all 3D modeling can be done with just extrusion and translation. Pretty true. What's the keybind for extrusion? Anybody? E. Indeed. Uh, what's the keybind for oh, doing alternative extrusion? That's a big hint there. Alternative extrusion. Alt E, Alt E. And it lets you have like different options. We went over that last meeting. If I grab something and I right click, it cancels the action. What happens if I extrude and I right click? If anyone has this one off the top of their heads. Am I have I lost people? I want to know like just how. Jeremy, you're very quiet. I'll crank you up a little. A little bit, a little bit. Indeed, there we go. It's much better. Yes. I see. Yeah. everyone's chilling. Everyone's chilling. I bet people are playing around with Blender a little bit, maybe. Um okay,
I'm
well,
just listening along.
good stuff, good stuff. um last time when we got into like the after meeting time, I don't know. I feel like people are afraid to disrupt formality and talk. But the reality is that there's no. This isn't supposed to be like super formal. I'm chill here, guys. Let's you can interrupt. Like it's cool. Um, But yeah, anyways, if I grab something and I right click, it cancels the action. If I extrude and I right click, it's already created the geometry and we're already grabbing it. When I hit E, it does two things. It creates geometry and then it grabs it. And so when I right click, it's only canceling the grab, but the geometry is still around. So that's worth knowing. If I have a square and I select an edge and delete edges, what's left? It's gonna look like a square. It's gonna be like a cube that's missing two sides. The three edges with no face between. Oh, a square. Okay, yeah, I thought I made a typo there, but yeah, yeah. So if I have like a square and I delete this edge, the other three edges are gonna be still there, but no face. Um, and that's it. Like at this point, if you were here for last meeting and you know about extruding and scaling and you know about how to navigate the like basic interface of Blender, you can literally 3D model like so much. Like you are very powerful at this point. You want to make a plant pot. You add a cylinder, and then you go into edit mode. You select the top face. You scale it up. You extrude upwards. You hold down Alt. You hold down Alt and you click and you select all of those, and then you extrude them outwards and you scale them a little bit on the Z-axis, and then you extrude this inwards and down, and boom, you have yourself a plant pot for your video game. You want to make a traffic cone? Done. No, I'm kidding. But like I mean, uh uh you okay, that's sorry. Bad way to start with a traffic cone. It should start with a cylinder. Um I mean, there was other ways to fix that, but like you want to do a traffic cone, you can totally do a traffic cone now by just there, boom, traffic cone. You want to do a coffee cup? You can totally now make a coffee cup. In fact, I have a video tutorial of my own posted for how to make a coffee cup from scratch. And it's it's a pretty like I'd like to believe it's a pretty decent tutorial. But it was recorded during tropical storm, not tropical storm, hurricane. We Floridians know that Dorian wasn't a real hurricane. Uh, Yeah. Um, this is an awful coffee cup, but I mean, like, what I'm, yeah, what I'm saying here. Boom. There, make a little hand holder thing, and maybe move these up a little bit. It's just because I'm rushing here to just make a point, but like, there you go. Bit more of a coffee cup. You want to give it like a little hole that you can drink out of. Boom, boom. Coffee cup. And then you know what? Let's smooth it and let's go over here to normals and check auto smooth. And it's really starting to look a lot more like a coffee cup. Turn on shading. We covered that last meeting. And now you can see it a little bit better that this really does kind of look like a coffee cup. Um, and that's with all of the skills that we've covered so far in the like 45 minutes of last meeting and in the 30 minutes so far. So intermediate stuff. Here we go. This is where it gets saucy. This is where the more important things to discuss are. It's this one starts with a bit of review. Um, don't mind the little cookie emojis you're gonna see. I used to reward my students with cookies and candy, but as we're not in person, we can't quite do that. So what are we gonna cover? What are we gonna cover here? We're gonna cover transformation origins. Uh, how you can, when you rotate something, normally it rotates it around its center of mass. You can set the center of rotation to be somewhere else. You can set the center of scaling to be somewhere else. Um, transformation coordinate systems, local space versus global space. These are settings that you can turn on and off in Blender. Special tips with alternative extrusion. Insets, slightly different than extruding and scaling. Filling, you can press F to generate faces. Merging stuff together with Alt M, duplicating with Shift D, hiding stuff, deleting edge loops, and glitch avoidance and optimization. That's a big one. That last one there is, that's important. The biggest issue people have when they first start 3D modeling is they have some really glitchy geometry. They'll have n-gons, they'll have points inside of other points. Z fighting, I'm sure you've seen Z fighting in a game before where there's like two surfaces so that they're like right on top of each other, and so you get this like glitchy kind of look. Anyways, we'll cover all of that today. So A quick review though, bit different this time. How did we go from the left to the right? I'm gonna wait until somebody other than Alexia unmutes himself. Unless, well, I said other than Alexia because um I don't know. Go ahead, Alexia, if you have a guess. But I mean, Trevor, I see you.
Just extrude it.
Yeah, just
Extrude
well,
it, scale it down.
extruded, scale it down. That's right, indeed. How do we go from extruding, scaling down to this
Subdivision.
subdivision? That's right. We right click and we hit that subdivide button. How do we do this? Loop cuts, indeed, loop cuts. How do we do that? No, you got to extrude them first because it is generating that fresh geometry like right here. Yeah, but yes, yeah, pretty much. I mean, you extrude and then you scale inwards. Um, how do we go from this to that? um, whatever, just another loop cut and then I scale out that like center loop cut that I make. Oh, this is cookie material right here. This is an extra challenging kind of thing. The way I used to do this is I'd be like, all right, you guys have 1 minute to turn the cube into that, and I would just like sit back and let the kids try. But if that's not, yeah, not necessarily something we can do right now without people necessarily sharing their screen though. Uh, to be honest, Jeremy's making some pretty cool stuff. Like, not gonna lie, that is it's interesting. Um, and then yeah, pretty much just go through the process of making a sword here. Uh, and then how do we add these to the sword with some loop cuts and some extrusion? And then how do we add the handle to the sword with literally just extruding and scaling? So since you guys aren't too keen to share your screen, I am going to and that's okay, by the way. Like, I'm not trying to sound bitter, but I'm gonna run through the process there. So I select this edge and I select this edge and I hit E and then I hit S and X and I scale them on the X axis and then I scale them on the Y axis and then I select the bottom edges and scale them in. And now we've got what looks like the hilt of a sword. Select the top edges, E, S, and then E. And oh, my scroll wheel is broken on my mouse right now. It's very frustrating. Grab that on the Z axis, make it nice and tall, E, and then scale in. And we've got a sword. And then I can add loop cuts like so. In fact, I'm going to add quite a few. And then I can go to face select and select this loop and hold down shift and alt and select this loop and select this loop. And actually, let's do the other ones, these loops. And then I can do E, and then I can do S, and Shift Z to scale it on everything but the Z axis so that they don't do that. See how the top ones are going inwards. Um, and then down here, if I want to make this really intricate, I can do that pretty easily just with some extruding and scaling and give it some really cool, intricate uh, looks, and then I just scale it in on the x-axis to get that hexagon, and then boom, and then I can just like that give it a little uh, handle looking thing, and boom, we have 3D modeled a kind of an awkward sword that needs more of a handle than that. What am I doing here? Uh, yeah, something like that. Sword. And that was literally just pressing E and S on my keyboard, along with like X, Y, and Z. And we've got a weapon ready to export to Unreal Engine or Unity that we can use for our games. I can barely do anything in Blender right now. Damn, Lukey Poo. That's unfortunate. Uh, are you saying by technical difficulties or like struggling personally? If you're struggling, that's stick around for a minute or two after the meeting. I'd be happy to run through some of this stuff. Oh, this is like a question. This is a Chris Vector on the top. Fun gun. How did I go from the Chris Vector to this shape over here? This is Alt E. I selected some faces on the silencer and I did Alt E and I extruded individual faces so that they come out individually. Um, how do you select a loop on a monkey? Anybody? Alt. you know, alt. And all right, here we go. So new stuff. New stuff. Is this not animated? Oh, no, it is. It is. Okay. So, well, it's not. Let's explain what these buttons do at the top of the screen. So you may have seen me a minute ago clicking on these two buttons. They're at the very top of Blender. You see where they are? They're right at the top center. These two buttons, global and this weird like two sphere thing on the right. These are the transformation origins as well as uh the coordinate space, I guess, the like space in which you're performing different transformations. So yeah, what is an origin? Yeah, the point is when you're scaling things relative to an origin in Blender, it's having an effect that is comparable to the little Desmos demonstration I put together here. So if we were to scale this smiley face of points, if we were to select all of them and scale them on the x-axis to 0, that's what happens. Like we're scaling that's what happens when I'm selecting stuff on the edge. If we scale them on the y-axis to 0, we can flatten them. If we scale them on the if we add to their x value, we can like shift them left and right. That's pretty irrelevant. But if I move them to the side and move them up to the right and I still scale them to 0, you can see that like even if they're way up there or way down there, if I scale them to 0 on the x-axis, it still flattens them out on the x-axis, but it does so relative to the origin, not relative to their center of mass. If we wanted to do it relative to their center of mass, then scaling them to 0 would flatten them somewhere around the line like x equals or y equals 4, like scaling them to 0 on the x-axis. But instead, they're scaling towards the origin. So when I decrease both x and y, it brings them closer to the origin. These are scale factors, x scale and y scale. So similarly in Blender, if I scale this sword down right here, it's scaling it towards its center of mass, and it thinks that the center of mass is over there, because that's where it starts. That's the object origin. And that's a pretty important thing to be aware of. When I rotate it, it rotates it around that orange dot right there. However, if I go to this button and I change it to 3D cursor, which is this weird little shape over here, now it's scaling it towards the 3D cursor. It is now rotating it relative to the 3D cursor. It's spinning around the 3D cursor. It is now moving it around doesn't change anything. It doesn't need a relative point. But if I put the 3D cursor like way out there, now I can rotate it around the 3D cursor and scale it towards the 3D cursor or away from the 3D cursor. So that's what a bit of the focus here is today, because that's really useful for a reason or two. And that reason, yeah, first things first, sorry. Bounding box center, origins and pivot points in Blender. Actually, I don't think we're going to cover that one. But individual origins and median point and active element are the most useful things here. These three, the three bottom ones: individual origins, median point, and active element. And so the object origin. It's important for exporting. That orange dot right there is the center of an object by default. And so when you export an object to Unity, like say you 3D modeled like a barrel or something. Let me recenter that. Shift A, cylinder, and you made a barrel or something, and you were to export it to Unity, and it looks cool, and you're really proud of it, and you're like, okay, this is about to be a I've finally done with my barrel. I'm gonna oh, let me set this back to median point. Finally gonna export my barrel, but you export it and notice I'm gonna move the geometry over there in edit mode. But when I moved it in edit mode, it didn't change the object origin. That orange dot is off to the side. When you export it to Unity and you try to roll this thing around in Unity or turn physics on, it's gonna roll around like that. It's gonna it's gonna just trip through the terrain. It's gonna roll around that because that's the center of rotation. That's the like center of mass as Unity is going to handle it. Um, so it's very important that you're aware of where that orange point is relative to your geometry. In Blender, when you move around geometry in edit mode, it does not pull the orange with it. When you move it in object mode, it does, but when you move it in edit mode, it does not. So now there is automatic ways to recenter that orange thing into the center of your geometry in Blender, but and we'll cover that. But the point is, like, just be aware of that spot. Be aware of that orange spot. It's important. Um, so median point. Here's a demonstration of median point. When I select like 17 monkeys or something, and they're all really far from each other, and we're using median point, which is the default. It's the default thing. It looks like two empty circles with a little tiny white dot between them. That means that like if there's like a barrel there and a barrel there and a barrel there, and I select all of these guys, it's going to scale them towards their cumulative like center of mass, their center of all of them. However, if this is set to individual origins, it's going to scale them all towards their individual origins. This applies in edit mode, and it's very important in edit mode. Notice over here we have these three continuous selections of faces. We have like his head, his ear, and his like chin over here. When we scale them in median point mode, it scales them around their center of mass, which is centered at the ear because the ear has all those like selected points. It's close to the ear. If you make it 3D cursor, you know, you can see what's going on here. I'm rotating and scaling in edit mode, and it's moving it relative to that 3D cursor. When you make it individual origins, however, here, look at this. I just, I generate a bunch of little faces, and then I scale them down. And you can see that each face, because it's not connected to other faces, it's scaling relative to its individual origins. So what I did here is I selected all the faces, I did Alt-E, extrude individual faces, so it created a bunch of disconnected faces. Then I canceled and I just scaled down. And it scaled every single face around its own origin. And then I grabbed them and it moved them along each one's individual normal vector. So for a demonstration here, why was that useful? Earlier when I was making the airplane wings, you might have noticed, you know, I selected some faces on one side, I selected some faces on the other side, and I was on median point. When I'm on median point, I can do this. I can do scale X, and it scales them away from each other on the X axis. However, once I'm in individual origins and I do scale X, it's scaling them relative to their own origin. So if I do SX0, I've just flattened these selections relative to the X axis. So these guys flattened themselves because they scaled themselves to 0 around their center of mass. These guys flattened themselves because they scaled themselves to 0 around, not all of them, SX0, and they've, you know, they did that. If I select these two guys and maybe like this guy over here and I do S, see, it's scaling them independently from each other. Very, very important to understand that. I hope I've made that like as clear as possible. And then finally, active element. You might have noticed in Blender that the last thing that you click is highlighted a little bit differently. Like, you see how this one is highlighted and then this one's highlighted and then I go back and that one's highlighted. That's the active element. So in some situations, you want to flatten everything relative to the active element. So you do that and then SY0. And just like that, we have flattened the wings relative to that one on the y-axis, that one relative to that one on the y-axis. So they're all sharing the exact same XZ plane. Yeah. So that's important to understand. Very, very important because it's used in some situations. Alternative coordinate systems. Forget gimbal, view, and cursor. Global, local, and normal are the ones you should kind of understand. The global ones are like the universal up, down, left, right, forward, backward. You know, Z positive, Z negative, just the universal up, down, true no matter where you are in Blender. However, local is relative to that object's rotation. So when you rotate something in object mode, when I take this and I rotate it in object mode, that object has its own local coordinate system. So if I switch to local and now scale it down on the x-axis, we're scaling it on its own x-axis because its x-axis has changed to reflect the rotation I just performed. The y-axis has changed to reflect the rotation I just performed. Even the z-axis. So that's kind of convenient in some situations, but generally for the purposes that you're going to be using Blender for game development, you're usually going to be working on one object at a time. You're not going to be building your entire world in Blender. And more importantly, even, um, you're not gonna rotate things in object mode. You're gonna be doing everything inside of edit mode. And so in edit mode, like these do hold true relative to object mode, but like you shouldn't ever have any transformations done in object mode. You should always just create a starter cube or something and then go to work in edit mode. So global will be the same as local space if you haven't done any rotating or something like that. Um, if you haven't rotated the object, then global space and local space are going to be the same. Um, and then normal. This one's pretty important as well. If I've got this like sideways object here and I want to slide this face along its surface, I can't really do that conveniently because it wants to slide along the normal things. Now when I switch it to normal, I can now manipulate that face relative to its normal vector. If you've taken calculus 1 or 2, you're familiar with normal lines. A normal line relative to a curve is perpendicular to the derivative of the curve. So a normal line here is that's the normal line. This is the normal line. On a 3D surface, uh, the normal of like this face is that that face is normal. It's that arrow. So when you manipulate things relative to this normal vector, you can see what that looks like if I turn up the widgets here. You can see how the let me actually turn off the rotation widget. You can see how the z-axis or the blue arrow here changes to reflect the normal vector. So if this face was rotated a little bit, say like that, I can now slide it along its along its tangent, along its cotangent, and along its normal. And that's useful in a lot of situations. But perhaps most evidently of all is when you do Alt E, extrude individual faces. They're extruding along their normals. And so if we then wanted to manipulate each of these guys along their normals, we would be, first of all, individual origins. And then I could do RZ, and we're rotating them along their own normals. Whereas if I was on median point, we'd be rotating along their, you know, you see the difference there. So individual origins, we rotate them along their own normals. So we can do some pretty, pretty interesting modern art. We'll call it that. Let's close the MS Paint calculus lesson there. Yeah. What's important with that? You can align vertices. This was like this one time I was modeling the Pantheon for like video game that I was making for a Latin project, and when I have it, see how I do active element over here, I can flatten I flattened that point there that was kind of off. Like you can see the geometry is clearly not lined up there. So I switched to normal vector, and I'm using the normal vector of like this vertex here, I think. Or rather, no, I'm just flattening it on the global y-axis relative to that point. And that's what I just did. I did SY0, and it flattened it relative to that other point. Alt E and normals and individual origins. Yeah, this is basically what I just explained. I can do Alt E. Yeah, I just rotated both those faces relative to their normals and then extruded them individually. And yeah, so individual origins, they're set to the normal mode, and I can rotate them, and you can see how both of them rotated in a symmetrical manner because they're not they're operating off of their own normal vector. The inset tool. The inset tool is almost identical to extruding and scaling, but I explain the key difference here. So let me visualize this for you guys. When we have a big cube that looks like that, and I did just scale it up in object mode, which you really shouldn't do. Should do everything in edit mode. And I do E, and then I do S. Notice how um, notice how the distance from the outer edge to these smaller edges is huge, but this distance is minimal. The inset button, which is just I, lets you keep the distances consistent. So if I just do I, and then over here I can impact the oh boy the relative. There's a lot of features here. Hold on. Oh God. 0.03, 0.02. There we are. Um, I believe. Oh yeah, here we go. Outset even. Outset? Nah, that's not. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. This normally, I believe that's the point of inset. Is that it? Inset. Yeah. Uh, yeah. It's not quite behaving perfectly. I wonder if that's because we're not in median point. Let's try the bottom one. No. Hmm. Individual, interpolate, bound. Well, it's not quite behaving the way that it does in my illustration here. Um, hmm. Well, just ignore that. What it's supposed to do, I wonder if that's a glitch in Blender. It might be. What it's supposed to do is it's supposed to behave like this one below, where it has an even border all the way around the like inset that you perform. Um,
It's working for me on my end. I think it might be because you scaled it.
Oh, you're right. It is because I scaled it in object mode. You're absolutely right. Let me make a new cube. Told you, never do scaling or rotating in object mode. Go in edit mode first, and then do your stuff. So there we go. Yup. See that even boundary all the way around. Thank you so much, Trevor. Appreciate that. And yeah, see that. So, inset, very useful. Um, Filling, the fill tool lets you fill stuff. Let me demonstrate on the monkey over here. If I go to our monkey and I delete a face, if I delete this chunk of his forehead, and then I go to vertex select, I can select these 4 vertices again, and then I can hit F, and it'll just generate a face between them. If I delete all of his forehead, I can select these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, I selected that happens sometimes. 7, 8 vertices. I can hit F, and it generates a big face there. Now this is an n-gon. You can see it's kind of glitchy. Like it doesn't really know where to triangulate it. It's kind of trying to guesstimate. So I can now control T, and it'll triangulate it automatically. And yeah, you can see it's done an interesting job there with the triangulation. That's why you want to avoid n-gons. But there's an n-gon. And it is 7:58. We're getting there. We're getting there. But yeah. Oh, just pressing F with a point in a hole selected will try to fill it from the closest triangle. That's also true. Very useful in some situations. Let's say I was to delete um uh let's just start anew over here. Let's say I delete that chunk of the monkey. I can select this edge and I can hit F, and it'll automatically attempt to fill in a kind of intelligent manner. If I select this edge, it tries to do triangle, and then it tries to go across into a square, and then it tries to do a triangle again. But really it's a trapezoid, but it's a wonky trapezoid. So there you go. Pressing F, very key thing to Blender. Um, merging. Yeah, you can select a bunch of vertices and do Alt M, and you can merge them at their center. You can see a demonstration of that on the right. Um, One of the most useful features of Alt M is not actually the like merging stuff; it's the by distance option. But we'll get to that at the very end of this lesson. I'm just going to try to speed along through these here since we're almost out of time technically. But I will stick around until 9:30 today, or not until 8:30. Um, so uh, duplicating, Shift D. That's how you duplicate. It works everywhere in Blender. Hiding. Um, yeah, when you press H, you can hide bits of the mesh temporarily. Think of it like hitting the I button on like a layer in Photoshop. You can just make it go away for a minute, and then you can bring it back by doing Alt H to unhide everything. And if you want to hide everything but your selection, you can do Shift H, and it hides everything else. It's useful sometimes when you want to like focus on part of a mesh. Like say you've already You're like, okay, I'm kind of done with the face of the monkey, so I'm just gonna H, and we're gonna focus on nothing but the head or something. That's a silly way to do things, but I mean, yeah, and Alt H to bring it back. If I want to focus on just the eyes, can select an eye and then do Shift H, and that's our monkey's eye, and everything else got hidden. And I can do Alt H and bring it back. Um, and deleting edge loops. That's an interesting one. I have this edge loop selected here around this fishing hut, same project that the Pantheon came from, and and you can do delete edge loops, and it'll automatically get rid of the edge loop without really breaking your geometry, and that's a pretty convenient thing. But you normally don't want to delete edge loops. Like it's good to keep them around until the very end when you're trying to optimize stuff. Um, so yeah, now at this point, I know I've been going kind of nonstop, but that is everything that you need to know that's like relevant to modeling in Blender. Like that's that's almost everything. The only things that we haven't covered are like mirroring as well as metadata, and metadata is big. And the mirror thing is like really easy to do. I'll be explaining that probably next meeting. A little bit about optimization. There's limitations for 3D modeling games. The amount of geometry that's in one of these monkey heads, it takes about 8 and a little more than a half monkey heads worth of geometry to create. I think her name is Alex from Half-Life. This is from Half-Life 1, I think, or maybe Half-Life 2. But the point is, um, it's incredible just how optimized these 3D models are. 8 monkey heads to make this whole human body with clothing and with a belt and a headband and this like jacket and necklace and everything. Um, how do we measure how optimized the 3D model is? By counting the number of triangles. This was Alex in 2004. To put things into perspective with how far games have come, it takes 4.5 Alexes, 5 Alexes roughly, to make Caviera from Rainbow Six Siege. Caviera is really detailed. She's got little straps and things, and you can tell she's high resolution. Um, and Assassin's Creed, get a sense of optimization here as well. Um, so a thing to keep in mind is polygon density should be somewhat uniform. If you've got like a cluster of really dense triangles somewhere, that's like, unless that's something a player is going to be focusing on, there's no reason to have little clusters of excessive detail somewhere in your model. And so the three, we're almost done here. We're probably going to be done by like 8 to 10. The three horsemen of glitches. um, on the right, we have n-gons, which is faces that have more than 4 sides. We'll explain why each of these are bad. Doubles, which is vertices on top of vertices. You're gonna see once once the GIF in the center resets, it looks like a cube, but then I start pulling out faces from it, and you can see it's like I hit extrude a million times and I canceled a million times, and you've got geometry inside of geometry inside of geometry, and that's so problematic. Like you cannot be having a 3D model that that looks like that. I'm trying to like move around the geometry to show just how much was squeezed into that cube, and that's bad. And then on the left we have Z fighting, and you can see that phenomenon occurring in Blender trying to render those faces that are stacked on top of each other. This is of course the monkey, but scaled to 0 on the x-axis around the origin. So it's been SX zeroed, and that's the result. So glitches happen to everyone. You just need to know how to fix them. If you're modeling correctly, I guess like you kind of develop an awareness of like, oh no, I've just created an n-gon by doing this or that, by subdividing, by extruding. I better go fix that. And so uh, Z fighting is when two faces share identical 3D space. So here I've extruded the top face all the way down to the bottom face, and they're right on top of each other. You can see that glitchy effect that they're having. It's corrected by deleting those faces, delete the overlapping stuff, and then fill it back together. Um, yeah, this is me after trying to fix the Z fighting. Still an issue on the side, so I merge those two points together. I merge those 2 points together, and now it's just one face there. So boom, fixed. Doubles. Doubles are when 2 or more points perfectly overlap. I take this cube on the left, move it exactly 1 unit to the right, and I got the right and left mixed up there. Jesus. You can see there's 2 vertices sharing that exact same point. So the only way to fix that is by selecting both of them and merging them into each other. Now there's an automatic way to do this. You can select all vertices and you can do Alt M and it'll say by distance, and you can merge any points that are, I don't know, closer than 5 nanometers apart or something. You set a threshold and Blender goes through all your points and collapses them into single points, single vertices. It happens often when you forget to undo a canceled extrusion. So fixing doubles, yeah, you select everything, you hit merge, and you do by distance. Let me show you an example of that. Here's our monkey. I'm just going to duplicate it, and we're going to have a second monkey, and I'm going to right click, so it's still there. The second monkey is still there. See if I grab that geometry, there's more geometry underneath it, and I can just select everything by hitting A. I can do Alt M, and it's this by distance. And then on the bottom left, it says merge distance, and it's like 1, I don't know, like nanometers or something. And it actually tells me, it should have said somewhere. Is it at the bottom of the screen? Yeah, right there. It says removed 508 vertices, and that little message goes away after a second. There it goes. So 508 vertices just got deleted, and those were the ones that were overlapping. So now it's just one monkey again. And I can prove it. It's not going to miss a single point because they were overlapping perfectly with each other. And then finally, n-gons. Here's the front of a jet that I messed the geometry up of. So you can see there, all I did is I selected a bunch of faces and I merged them together into a single face. So this is one giant glitchy n-gon. The computer is attempting to triangulate it, but it's a bad triangulation. The way to fix these is by triangulating, but when you triangulate, it's bad. It doesn't do a great job by fixing them. So there's nothing you can really do. And that's what's happening here. I purposely went in and broke the faces, and then I hit Control T to triangulate. That is the button, Control T, and it just creates that messy geometry, and it's not great. So yeah, some quick review. What's going on here? Z fighting. Z fighting. 2 faces or two points. It's kind of similar to doubles. Are sharing the exact same surface. They're sharing the exact same surface. What is this? This is doubles. When you have 2 vertices right on top of each other. And then over here, oh yeah, this is an interesting one. How many n-gons are in this picture? A lot of people tend to miss them. There's an n-gon happening over here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's an n-gon happening over here, 5 points, and this is an n-gon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're not bad in this case. Like, they don't look bad because they're planar. The computer doesn't have to do any weird triangulation because 2 points are higher than another 2, and it doesn't know how to like display it. But normally, that kind of thing is bad. And you do not want to have n-gons. It prevents your loop cuts from working. It prevents your subdividing from working. It'll break all sorts of things when there's n-gons in your model. And so yeah, a sneak peek of advanced 3D modeling. I show off beveling here if I remember correctly. Yeah, boom, beveling. We'll cover that probably next meeting. But that's it for today, everybody. General body meeting. I have to head out, but thank you for the tutorial. Yeah, Godspeed, Hannah. Yeah, and that's everything. I mean, I can stick around now and do little 3D modeling stuff with you guys if you want. Like, ask me to model something, and I'll show you how to make it from scratch. But yeah, that's it. Oh, so how's everybody doing tonight? Sounds good.